As you look back and reflect on, maybe that kind of first part of your life, if we want to use a certain hike in Colorado as like the dividing point, what do you like? How did your life go? How did you end up in such a difficult place health wise? And again, using hindsight to look back and evaluate kind of your life.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I did go through a period of chubbiness when I was in middle elementary school. And so I can look back and can see like that's when the emotional damage began with my health and wellness journey and just, using food to cope and hiding food and sneaking food. And that is like the early signs of when I really did have a sugar addiction because I can remember my mom used to buy the little Debbie snack cake rolls, and I have a baby brother who's only 10 and a half months younger than me, and I wanted to make sure that he didn't get any of those. So I can remember like hiding those and sneaking them and like making sure that I had access to them. So that was my very early signs. I did thin out a little bit in the high school years, but again, I was always the bullying continued. Throughout my high school years too. I'm not really sure why. I could look back on pictures of myself and I can see that I wasn't chubby or overweight at that time, but I just felt very insecure in my own skin. And then when I went away to college, I lived in a dormitory, so I was eating in the college cafeteria. And unfortunately, I really think that it has a lot to do with my metabolism. I'm super carb sensitive, and, my metabolic health just continued to deteriorate. Of course, I was eating standard American diet. And over from my adult years, 18 to 48, when I finally had my turning point moment at another mountain in Colorado in Rocky Mountain National Park, I was I never would have called myself a sugar addict during those years, Casey. Never. I never thought that. I just thought that for some reason I was a yo-yo dieter. I had some diet success, and then I would get to a certain point, and perhaps I would try something in moderation, and it would send me on a slip or a relapse, and then I would just be right back to where I was started from. And all of those years, I had doctors telling me that I needed to lose weight. Like, hello, tell me something I didn't know, because eventually I got up to 230 pounds on the scale that I know of. Like, that's the highest weight that I saw on the scale. I didn't weigh myself that often, but tell me something I didn't know. I know I need to lose weight. And they would say, eat less, move more. And so I would try to exercise. I did the aerobics in the 90s, like the aerobics craze. I joined gyms. I counted my points. I counted calories. I actually did a liquid protein shake diet for 10 months in a hospital supervised clinical program, and none of it stuck. And I had doctors telling me, I remember in that hospital program, they said you have metabolic syndrome, but they really didn't explain it was. And then eventually I started hearing terms like insulin resistance, and then I was pre-diabetes, and then I was morbidly obese, and so on. So I did, no one ever stopped to talk to me about the impact of the hormones on my health, what was happening with my blood sugar, what was happening with my insulin hormone. And so I would just continue to try to follow all the dietary advice that I thought was going to work, every time. And nothing just really clicked for my metabolism.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a difficult journey. I was kind of a chubby kid and at that same age as well, which is like the worst time to experience that.
Yes.
Very traumatic at that age, 12, 13,
Yeah.
to be going through that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's very interesting. It's so frustrating when you hear that story and everybody hears it, where the doctor is only telling you that you need to lose weight, but they don't really tell you how. And if they do, it's the wrong advice anyway. And it's like you said, like I know, you don't need to tell me that. Like I already know that. I already feel bad about myself. Was there an
Mhm.
element of you? I know we're both huge fans of Jason Fung. He talks about like blaming the victim, that kind of thing. Were you blaming yourself at this point? Did you think that something was broken with you because all these doctors were telling you the same thing and it just wasn't working for you?
Oh, absolutely. Because every time I would lose weight, like if I would lose 40 pounds and then I would regain 50, and then I would lose 45 pounds and gain 55, it was just a vicious cycle. And as a professional career woman in my career life, I was an accountant in corporate America for many years. And, I felt like I had a successful career. My kids were growing up and they were thriving, were just typical middle income family, and but I couldn't get this weight loss thing right. It's like, what am I missing? What is like, how can I get everything else in my life right, but I can't do this? And I got to the point where I was really hopeless. And so when I did go to that Rocky Mountain National Park in the fall of 2015 with my husband for an anniversary trip, he planned some hikes for us, and he wanted to go to Nymph Lake at Bear Lake stop, and I looked at the mile marker, the trail marker, and it said a half a mile, and I thought, well, I could give that a try because, a half a mile. And I wasn't walking with a cane or a walker or anything at that point, but I was chronically exhausted and 100 pounds overweight. And I gave it my best effort. And I got about halfway up that trail, and I just could not go another step further. I was gasping for air, and my body was just saying, no, no more. And so I sat on the stump on the side of that trail, and gave my husband permission to go ahead, go on without me. He's like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm absolutely sure." So it was really in that moment that I remember just praying like, God, I just want to feel better because like I said, I was getting to hopeless. I was getting to the point of hopelessness and that feeling like I was going to always be obese. And but in that moment, something shifted. Like I just did not want that to be my story because at that time I was only 48 years old. Started thinking about my future grandchildren, started thinking about my daughter who just started nursing school. Oh my goodness, is she going to have to take care of an old and really obese mom? And like all these thoughts I'm having. So I came home from that trip with a really different resolve in my heart. It's like a no plan B. It's like, I have to do this now. It's now or never, is basically what it came down to.
Wow. That's amazing. What a cool story. How did that not send you even harder into the same advice? How did that not mean to you like, oh, now I need to double down on more exercise. I can eat less than I ever had before. How was that not the path?
Yeah, well, interestingly, the first thing I promised my husband to do when we got home was to schedule a sleep study that I had been putting off for years. He had been asking me to do that because I snored very obnoxiously, and it escalated a lot when I was in Colorado. So coming home to Michigan, I told him I'm going to get a sleep study. And so I started researching about sleep and sleep hormones and hormonal health and everything. And that kind of lit a fire in my curiosity, or it made me very curious, like about my hormonal health. And then very shortly after I got my CPAP machine, I started having painful ovarian cysts. So then I had a abdominal ultrasound, and then that diagnosed me with fatty liver disease. And then, like, the interest in hormones just took off from there. I wanted to know why my liver was full of fat. How did that happen? Why didn't my doctor seem that concerned? So I did a lot of research myself. And I remember reading something somewhere. I did not bookmark it, unfortunately, but I remember reading that sugar is a major hormone disruptor. My liver is loaded with fat because of I believed at that time it was because of my diet. And then I really had to take a hard look at how much sugar I was really eating. And so that's what set me down this path of living a sugar-free lifestyle. It was step by step. And I'm a believer, I do see God's hand all over it with my chronic disease diagnosis that was piling up. I think if I would have done it all on at one point, it would have been too overwhelming. But I can see like a little bit gradually, I learned more and began to discover so much more about our hormonal health and our metabolic health. And it was just really the key to unlocking my obesity, like what Dr. Fung talks about.